It's interesting listening to the challenges and watching the challenges in chat. I feel like we continue, the biggest challenge, and I had it in the chat right away, it continues to be ourselves. And it continues to be the way that we're thinking. And so, I've noticed as I was kind of reflecting on Dirk kind of talking me into doing these things all the time, I noticed that whenever we get together and try to figure out what I'm going to talk about, we always end up landing in a place where I'm actually talking about how we develop ourselves. And I thought, wow, that's like really appropriate for me because I've been, always passionate about pushing the bar. I think my team will all tell you that I question, do we have to do things that way? Can we do things differently? And so when I listen to the biggest challenge and I look at even the answers and the responses, I still feel like the biggest challenge is ourselves. So you might be wondering, what does all this mean for us as learning professionals, and particularly those of you who are interested in advancing your career or just staying relevant or addressing some of those problems that, as we looked upon the challenges facing L&D, there are some inherent challenges with our work. And in order to address those challenges, we need to keep changing and evolving. And we talk about learning, but we don't always live into it ourselves. Sometimes we do. I think we're always experimenting. I think I hear a lot of great stories about people experimenting, but we tend to a lot of times to continue to rest on our existing approaches and then get disappointed when our approaches don't work. And, I actually saw it in the chat somewhere like, oh, well, we can't really measure learning on the flow of work. So, maybe we're going to be pushing back on that instead of actually trying to say, wait a minute, how can we do that? Knowing that learning needs change, how can we do that? How can we measure it? How can we show that we're having an impact? So we need to be different. We need to change. We need to evolve. And we need to do something differently. And so some of the things that we can do are really open more doors to how we learn, open more doors to learning, understand and connect to our own purpose as learning and professionals. And then lastly, I think just reframe our role. And I'm going to talk about each of these right now. Connecting to purpose and discovering your why, it's something that, if you go on LinkedIn, just everybody's talking about it right now. And I think we often are talking about our concepts in the context of leaders and often trying to figure out can we get leaders to be more purpose-driven and to share purpose and drive purpose with their teams. But I think at the end of the day, and I actually think I've gone through these periods of ups and downs in my own career, or ups and downs, just I don't know what I'm going to do next. And I think it really is critical at these turning points in your career as you have these ups and downs, and particularly when you're in a lull, to kind of really reflect on what is my purpose and really make sure that you're in a place and you're living in a way where you can really live into your purpose. Purpose, and I talk about this in an article that I recently wrote, The Neuroscience of Purpose, and I think you can find it all over LinkedIn. But from a learning perspective, it actually boosts our intrinsic motivation to learn. And so focusing attention on something bigger than ourselves, it actually makes us neurologically and physically more equipped to handle difficult challenges. And so I often look back at my life and think, how did I do that? Well, I must have had a sense of purpose, because physically, I don't know how I did that. I don't know how I did all those things. So purpose seeking is part of our ancient hardwired system, and it really just energizes us. And what's interesting about these tactics, these tactics of creating purpose for yourself and reflecting and driving purpose, is that it all works through this brain reward network. And so that's the system that releases the feel-good transmitter dopamine when needs are met. And so the effect of having a purpose is that serving it makes us want to do more of that. And it multiplies our motivation and exponentiates our ability to learn. And so what it essentially does is it makes us happier. So I'm going to close with that. And just a reminder, these three things: open more doors, discover your purpose, reframe your role. And I actually talked a lot about some of the neuroscience I talked about today in my book, Hardwired to Learn. But you can just reach out to me